mean, when I was a kid, I was just listening to, like top 40 AM radio, so like the things that caught my attention most on it, though, were kind of like the songs that were a little bit, I guess like had more of an edge to them, or a little bit harder rocking, like, I remember like totally grooving to Heartbreaker by the Rolling Stones. But there were, exceptions, like I got all weepy to Seasons in the Sun by Terry Jacks.
Oh yeah, that was a great one, wasn't it?
It's just, and I just kind of lived out in the suburbs, and there, it was just like whatever kids in school were listening to and stuff like that. I mean, I wasn't really aware of like anything that was happening locally by any means.
So, what was your background like in terms of your family life and that sort of thing?
Hold on, Sean. I might have to move to another room.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, never mind. I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, so in terms of your family life and that sort of thing, was it like a normal sort of upbringing, normal family?
I guess. I mean, no family's really normal, right?
Oh, of course, yeah. Was there any... Sorry, I was going to say, was there any sort of creative, were any of your family performers or creative in any sort of way?
My mom had been an opera singer.
All right.
But, there wasn't a whole lot of, like, creative expression in that household, I wouldn't say.
Okay. Yes.
My dad, as far as I can tell, music didn't affect him one way or the other.
All right.
Didn't listen to music at all.
So what made you really want to, what was the moment when you really wanted to be a musician then? What sort of prompted that?
I don't know. I mean, like when I was probably in junior high, I probably had fantasies of I remember listening to Sweet and Aerosmith records and doing air guitar in front of the mirror. Which I think a lot of kids at that age at that time probably did.
Yeah.
These days they're probably playing video games in front of the mirror or something. Or just actually going on YouTube and then watching themselves.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's but you started off with a group called Green River, didn't you?
No, my first band was Mr. Ep.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay, I've been missing form. Sorry.
yeah, and that was actually a bunch of my buddies in high school who had this band, Mr. Ep and the Calculations. Mr. Ep was a math teacher, and it was an imaginary band. It was just this sort of fake thing, and this was a group of people who were actually, we listened to some of the stuff that I guess was becoming classic rock, like The Who and Jimi Hendrix and stuff like that. But my friend Smitty in particular was somehow got turned on to the Velvet Underground, and we were listening to that and Brian Eno and just various things were kind of, we were becoming aware of kind of more, I guess, underground sort of thing.
Yeah, more esoteric sort of sounds.
Yeah, stuff that wasn't played on the radio, and and there was also this used record store that we would go to in our suburb that was owned by this couple who had a band called Student Nurse, which we didn't know anything about that when we were going in there, but that's what turned out to be the case. And they, and whoever worked there were just totally happy to turn us on to, you know, everything from like the New York Dolls to Ornette Coleman. So it was, you know, a place that we would hang out and just learn stuff. And they weren't like judgmental and like, you know, would like go buy a Jean-Luc Ponty record or something. You know, they would just be like, you know, whatever you are into, that's great. But you know, it was that kind of like trying to figure out what's out there that is not being you know, like reading about music and learning about it and hanging out at this record store, and that kind of, you know, like I was just maybe a little too young for the initial like 77 punk thing.
Yeah.
But by the time like hardcore happened in like 80, 81, I was there.
So, you actually, did you really go out of your way to just find something different then? Was that your, you know, your thing to do? Or did you, were there any bands that influenced you, you know, that you wanted to sort of emulate? That sounds...
all of them? You know, when you're in an imaginary band, you want to be as real as any real band. I think, you know, I remember the initial things we used to do, like, Darren, the drummer, was the only person who really knew how to play his instrument. And he played really well. You know, like played in school band and stuff like that, and had kind of almost a Mitch Mitchell-like style. Whereas the rest of us, who were just, like, Smitty and I went halves on a small amplifier and a pawn shop guitar. Todd, the bass player, like, I don't know where he acquired his bass, and, you know, at first we had just, like, one amp, and we would plug everything into it, including, you know, the guitar, bass, and the vocals, and, eventually got like a second amp, and when we decided we wanted to play a first show, like, Darren was like, you know, I don't think I can be seen playing with you guys. So we actually got someone else who was a guy who worked at that record store, who played drums on our first show, and after that, like, Darren was like, I can do this. And he came back and kind of my initial thought with, like, making music, since we were so untalented and had no idea what we were doing, like, we didn't know anything about tuning to begin with, you know, if that gives you any idea. Like, we were just basically making noise. Yeah. And Smitty had bought, like, an alto sax because he was really into Albert Ayler. You know, so the idea was just to get feedback, make noise, and Darren would hold down a beat, and maybe like Todd would lock in with a bass line. But that was kind of like the earliest version of that band. And then, like, I met a guy my first year in college who, like, showed me a bar chord and, like, how to tune a guitar. That kind of changed.
Well, there was quite a few bands at the time that were coming through, like the Melvins and Soundgarden as well, all at the same time as yourselves, roughly, I think. Were you aware of these other bands?
The Melvins, I think, started in '83, but I don't think they played Seattle till like '84. When I met them, there was this all-ages club that existed for like maybe a year and a half called the Metropolis, and met Buzz and Matt there, and sometimes, like, they would be hanging out with, like, their tall friend who we later realized was Chris Novoselic. And Buzz and Matt just, like, they would drive from Aberdeen or Montesano, same thing, except maybe 10 minutes apart, which is about 2 hours, 2.5 hours away from Seattle, like every weekend, and just like stay the weekend and go to shows because there's absolutely nothing happening where they're at. And we befriended them because they were like people you saw every weekend. It was a very small group of people that were hanging out and going to local punk shows. Yeah, what was the question? So they were actually they were going at the same time Mr. Rep was going, but I probably didn't see them until like the early days of Green River when they actually played in Seattle.
Right. Okay.
They were really, really cool at the beginning. I mean, like fast. They were like maybe the fastest band in Seattle, which is really funny to think about now. And they had a different drummer, and their songs were like kind of Wipers influence too, which was really cool.
Yeah.
And then they got Dale, and everything just slowed down. And it was like, holy shit, what's going on here? Band is going on to another level,
Were you influenced at all by the industrial music? Because that's sort of in my head, the way I discovered music was it was electronica. Well, it was sort of electronica, then sort of indie, and then industrial sort of came out of both of those, and then sort of grunge came sort of after that. But it was similar sort of sound to industrial, I thought. Anyway, it was like not a sub branch, but the same sort of really sort of noisy, dirty sound to it. Were you influenced at all by any groups at all that were in the industrial movement? Or?
Well, I mean, like when Soundgarden first started, and there was like another band called Feast, who never heard of, but like were probably the great lost Seattle grunge band of the 80s. They had a very like kind of gothic bent to them in a way.
Yeah.
Like I remember, like Kim used to play his guitar through a lot of like flange. So there was kind of like like Bauhaus was definitely an influence.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They
loved that. Yeah.
Lost that at some point, but I remember the first time there was a different record store downtown that specialized in like imports.
Yeah.
Like downtown Seattle, so I'd have to take a bus to go there. And I remember talking to the owner of that shop about Bauhaus, who I hadn't heard yet, and it was like, I kind of tell me about this. He's like, it's what heavy metal should sound like. It was like this, like that first record. So it's like definitely like heavy, without being like, having ridiculous guitar solos and.
I always found it strange that when I spoke to, because I got into sort of like, and I'm sort of, I'm 50, so I missed 77 because I was too young,
Right.
And then I sort of discovered music a bit later on, and then I sort of discovered music, the punk sort of thing, round about when I was in my 20s, but it finished by then. So.
Right.
Yeah, so I had to find something new, But I always found that all the heavy metal fans, they were sort of dressing in, the denim, and they were sort of acting, always acted really, really macho, and they had big bubble perms, and all the music was full of love ballads, and I couldn't understand how they thought that was like, more macho than like punk or. Well, anything at all, really, except for pop. It was basically just dressed up pop, I thought.
Yeah, but but that kind of heavy metal actually attracted girls.
Of course, yeah. I mean,
that might have had something to do with it.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, I mean Bon Jovi and that sort of thing.
I mean, there were definitely like women involved in the local punk rock scene, and
yeah.
But it didn't have like the broad appeal Well, it didn't have the broad appeal on many levels, you know. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, you know, like to me, like there's like Discharge and Motorhead aren't really that far apart.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, when did you start? When you got your band together, Mudhoney, how did that come apart? You know, how did that? How did it all start, and when did you start getting gigs and that sort of thing?
Well, Green River broke up, and Steve and Dan had actually been sort of just started kind of playing together, and I called up Steve and I was like, hey, you know, he was actually living up in Bellingham, going to college up there, and I was like, hey, you should come back down to Seattle, and we'll take another crack of being in a band together, because he left Green River pretty early on, like he left in '85. But we still, like, after that, I played drums in a band with him called the Thronuts, which was like an improvisational group, but it wasn't as stuffy as that sounds. Basically, the idea was like it was formed by the bass player Leighton, who had been in bands and loved to play, but hated practice. Just thought like there's the worst thing you can do is just go over the same fucking song over and over and over again, right?
Yeah.
So he had this idea of just like having this band and we just play, and whatever you play, that's it, and you only do that once, you don't learn anything, you just like maybe record stuff, but you know, you just keep moving, right? And so how this band would work was our buddy Ed Fotherham, who does, you know, done a lot of artwork for Mudhoney and other people, you know, used to be a roommate of mine. We would, like, if we had a show or a recording session, we'd basically get drunk, write song titles that cracked us up, make those songs.
I wondered where Big Muff came from as well. Yeah, that's probably.
Oh, that's a pedal.
Is it?
Yeah. It's a pedal, Big Muff Pie. It's by Electro-Harmonics.
Oh, okay.
The Big Muff, and it has the pie symbol.
Right. In England, Muff
Obviously
is
very, very intentionally raunchy.
Yeah. Well, Muff is slang in England for something else.
Oh yeah, here too.
Yeah. Oh right. Okay. Yeah. So. And isn't Mudhoney the name of a Russ Meyer film as well?
It is.
Yeah, so that was intentional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember becoming aware of that movie title, at least, when I was in Green River, and thinking, if I ever start another band, Mudhoney would be or just thinking like Mudhoney would be a great band name.
Yeah. Well, the first time I'm aware of your work, because I was working at, I've worked in games companies, computer games companies, but back in the proper age, before it got all commercialised, you know, in the 80s and 90s and that. And it was great because, you know, great mix of people, but obviously Nirvana came along, but, and then we started to learn about the, you know, the predecessors that became before it and that sort of thing, and your name came up, you know, Mudhoney, and so obviously I got that EP, the Big Muff EP, and it was absolutely fantastic. You know, I just loved that sort of noisy, chaotic sound. You know, it was back to the sort of punk era thing, wasn't it? Just sort of rough and ready, but a great song. You know, so you've been quoted, well not quoted, sorry, but other people have quoted as been saying that the Super Muff. Super Fuzz Big Muff EP was a massive influence. People like Kurt Cobain and that sort of thing.
You'd have to ask them. I can't really speak to, like, you know, I can't like just claim.
Yeah, but I mean, how does that? I mean, that how do you feel about that? There, I mean, you know, the fact that you've inspired, you know, other groups.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I know, like, you know, well, Soundgarden was already going. They had their own thing, you know, and you know, by the time Mudhoney was going, Melvins. Same with the Melvins. But, you know, we were all like kind of playing shows together, so I think, you know, you just sort of get influenced by your friends.
Sure, yeah.
You know, and what you're, you know, I went to university with Kim Thiel, and, you know, we both worked at the local college radio station, and, you know, every week there'd be a new batch of records came in, and we, you know, worked in the worked for the music director, and part of our job was, like, to go through the records and, like, decide, you know, if these are records that, you know, how much we liked them, you know, and if they were records that would, like, what kind of rotation they would get, you know. And so, you know, just after school, or after class, actually I was graduating at that point, but I would, like, you know, get a pile of records. I remember going over to Kim's apartment, and we would just drink beer and listen to records and talk about them.
Okay, so in terms of
that happened a lot.
well, I mean, I used to sort of like
not just with Kim, but, you know, like with Steve, and you know, and Jeff and Stone in Green River, you know, like
So, Sonic Youth, I mean, did you work with them at all?
We toured with them, and we did a split single, but we didn't, like, work with them, like, on any song in particular. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And what do you think, I mean, obviously, yeah, the grunge thing, you know, I mean, in England it sort of came out of nowhere, but I think it was needed because it's almost like the punk scene again, where we were all tired of the same old, you know, pop music again. It was all getting a bit samey and, you know, rubbish and safe. And it was like the new punk.
Well, I remember, like, in the 80s, it seemed like, you know, there were, at the radio station I worked at, there were some people who were definitely Anglophiles.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking, like, a lot of the British music that was getting hyped was kind of lightweight.
Yeah.
I mean, there were definitely, like, cool things happening at the underground level, like the Folk Devils and Spacemen 3, and that Crazy Heads. First few singles were brilliant. But you know, like, things like, I mean, I don't even know what this band even sounds like anymore, but it's just like the Mighty Lemon Drops or something like that. I mean, that's,
oh, yeah.
the Chameleons, you know, this sort of lighter. I'm not even sure what that music sounds like at this point, but it just, like, did nothing for me. And I was very into, like, what was happening in the U.S. underground and the Australian underground. You know, we're like, in the UK around that time, there was that whole concept of, like, rockist.
Yeah.
You know, which is, like, equating, like, being rock with, like, you know, raucous, like, it's like sexist or racist.
Yeah.
You know, if you're raucous. And somehow that's, like, on the same level as being sexist or racist.
Yeah.
Some of the critics who would call you rockist, you know, which is just absurd to me.
I think we got a little bit obsessed with the indie scene, you know, the indie guitar scene for a while, and I mean that was okay in itself, you know, but it wasn't going anywhere new, and it all got a bit samey, and it turned into pop again. You know, everything seems to turn into pop if you leave it long enough, I think, you know, and we all got bored of it, really. I mean, later on, a little bit later on, groups like what they're called again. Wait a minute, I have to Google it. It's embarrassing. Radiohead. Bloody hell, I can't remember. I can't remember the name of Radiohead. A group called Radiohead came through as well later on, but they had a sort of, similar sound to grunge, didn't they? But
that creep song, yeah.
Yeah. So
they moved on quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, they did their own thing, but yeah. So it was a break, really. I mean, everyone was like, everyone loved it. How did you feel about Nirvana? They sort of became the focal point, didn't they, for it all?
Why? What are you asking?
Well, at least in the UK, grunge was basically Nirvana plus maybe Soundgarden and a couple of other bands, but they seem to be the one that took over the role of grunge and that sort of thing. What did you feel about that? Did you feel a bit sort of left out or cheated, or because
I'm totally fine with it.
Yeah.
when we started, I was like 26. I was pretty firmly entrenched in what it was I wanted to do and what I thought was like great about music. And most of my favorite bands, if you looked at my record collection at that point, like I would say like 80% of the records I had were like bands that like never made it in a commercial sense.
Yeah.
Made great fucking records. Sure that I had records like by David Bowie and Alice Cooper and Neil Young and stuff, and Black Sabbath, but those were in my record collection. Just their success would have been the anomaly,
Yeah.
And we knew exactly what we sounded like, and we're aware of it, and we're actually surprised that we had as much appeal as we did.
I think it had that sort of, I don't know, it sounded to me like the Sex Pistols, to be quite honest, out of all the groups I could compare it with. Not in terms of melody and that sort of thing, but just the actual raw sound of it, without sounding pretentious.
Right.
But yeah, I think that was it was just quick records that were quick and dynamic and just fun, yeah, I don't know, it just appealed because it was you don't have to read a book about how great it is. It's just your lyrics weren't deep. It's just a fun record to sit and listen to, and it's like quite catchy, and you had that knack of like catching a tune, didn't you? So
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I followed.
Well, all your records, your singles were quite fast. They were quite rhythmic. They were quite appealing. They were a little bit like punk in a way. Where you had like a really quick record that was fast and.
Yeah, I mean, punk rock was remains a huge influence. I mean, I remember when we first went to the UK. You go to like the used record shops, and you'd find all these old punk singles for like £1.
Yeah.
And we were like, holy shit! I've never even seen this, and here it is for nothing. We went into a frenzy, but then like a couple of years later, there was like people caught on, and the prices were up, and same records that were £1 in the bins were now on the wall for like £20 or £30.
Yeah. I mean, you still work in the business, obviously, and you still perform and everything. But how do you find that?
I prefer to think that we're not really in the business.
No.
Just a band who plays.
But how do you?
I work in a record label warehouse,
Oh, I think I know what you mean, but I mean, how do you think that? I mean, from the early days of like rawness and individuality, I think music's changed a lot in the last. Well, it's been slowly going downhill in some areas. It started off in the '80s, and then like grunge came in for a bit and stopped it, and it started again. There's no sort of character, I don't think, anymore with music. You don't really get any movements anymore, do you?
Well, I don't know. I would bet, like, if I haven't had my ear to the ground the way I used to, but I know there's shit happening in the underground.
Right.
But is it going to bubble up? I mean, I think, the UK to me seems really like fashiony and fickle in the way like music is covered in the press. I mean, it's less so now with like magazines like Mojo and stuff, but back in the days when it was like 3 weekly music magazines, when you had The Enemy and Sounds and Melody Maker.
Yeah.
It was all about whatever the latest flavor was and the hot new thing, and yet they put out magazines every week, so they had to like just hype something new, and then like kind of tear down something that they'd hyped up, just to keep churning out
some interest. Yeah.
Well, churning out just like a paper that would bring in advertisers.
Yeah, I think it's. I think Melody Maker went out of business. Not long.
Oh yeah, Sounds did a long time ago too.
Yeah.
Enemy's the only one that's still standing.
Yeah.
And so there was. I remember going back to the '90s, like after the thing that seemed to happen. Well, what happened here after grunge was like presidents of the United States of America. It was a super poppy and super happy and silly band, and then there was all this talk of like electronica taking over and rock being dead.
Yeah.
That was a thing for like a couple years, and then all of a sudden, like the Strokes and the White Stripes and all that happened. So
that's a good point. Yeah.
It's always just ridiculous to me when anyone like makes this sort of blanket statement, like this style of music is dead.
Yeah.
Or that there will be nothing. I mean, I don't think there's anything that has come from the underground that is so. Well, actually, White Stripes are probably close to Nirvana, if not there. I don't know.
Yeah, I think. I don't think quite as many sales, but they certainly made a big impression on the world, didn't they? They certainly, I've heard of them at least. So, yeah. So, yeah. So, what are you doing nowadays then? What? I know you work for Sub Pop. What are you doing nowadays?
Like personally, or with the band, or
both really. I mean, so what's your future? Where do you see your future going with the band? And
with with the band, we can kind of map out about 6 months to a year ahead of time. And we kind of have to at this point in order to like play shows because everyone works and we have to get our vacation schedules aligned.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So we kind of have a general idea of what our touring will look like. Like the dates haven't been set like through 2019. And as far as, I'm concerned, I like hanging out with my family and going surfing as often as possible.
Oh, of course, yeah. I was in Seattle a few years ago, actually, because my auntie actually lives on Vancouver Island on the other side.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Vancouver Island has good surf.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not a surfer myself. I think I'd sink it if I stepped on a surfboard. But yeah, I love Seattle. I went on a business trip there once when I worked in computer games as well, for a few days. So, yeah, so that was a completely irrelevant part of the conversation, but I just like to share that with you. Okay, do you think you'd ever retire completely from music?
That ever what?
Would you ever retire from music, do you think, completely?
Oh, I don't know. It's not a desire of mine.
Mm.
As long as I'm having fun and enjoy hanging out with everyone in Mudhoney, I think, and everyone feels the same, I think that'll keep going. Although, I mean, I assume there's probably at some point when our limbs or brains won't be working.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Okay, well, thank you for that. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me. Would you mind if I sent you a copy of the book when it comes out? It's probably going to be...
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm hoping for Christmas, but it depends on the other people that are involved, like the book designers, that sort of thing.
Right.
But
it seems short for a book that you're still writing.
Oh well, it's lots of people are in it. There's people like Steve Albini, and it's about the musical acts that made an impression on me.
Oh, right.
So there's quite a few people in there. There's like people like Kevin Godley from 10cc and Godley and Cream.
Oh, right. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Watched the Godley and the 10cc documentary on YouTube not too long ago.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I Skyped him live, and that was amazing. I'm just sat in my flat, and he's talking. This similar to yourself. I'm always amazed when people like yourself talk to me, and give me all these great stories and information, and I'm just sat in my flat writing a book, So, so that's amazing. So thank you for that.
Sure. Good luck with your book.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll get in touch with Bex, and I'll let you know when it's coming out. And well, thank you again. It's been amazing. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you. Take care, Matt.
All right. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.